Shalom, this is Daniel Stern of Netivyah. Thank you for joining once again. We've got a lot of news today. We have stuff happening in Gaza. We have stuff happening with Trump's visit to the Middle East. We have new deals on the table. Lots to talk about. So let's get started. First of all, in Gaza, on Tuesday evening, the Israel Defense Forces bombed the European hospital in Khan Yunis, and Hamas's reports are ever increasing regarding the casualties, 30, 50, 70, 80, and so on. This was a targeted strike against Muhammad Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, whose infamous brother Yahya orchestrated October 7th, in addition to other targets. After the strike, the IAF continued striking in order to stop rescue attempts, thus increasing the success chances of the strike due to injury and smoke inhalation. For example, yesterday, a tractor that was trying to remove debris was destroyed. Now, unrelated to that, Netanyahu says what we all already knew, that the previous U.S. administration's pressure on Israel has cost us blood and lives, and that from this point on, nothing will stop us from getting the job done, that things will be different now, that we will destroy Hamas. Time will tell. Netanyahu has often looked to blame others for his inaction. In the same meeting where he said that, he also said that we will capture Gaza and have security control over it forever. Within days, things will happen that we have seen nothing like it in the past. Media reports that the U.S. have removed its veto on Hamas being part of the government in Gaza. But as you will see later, that is probably a lie. For example, Hamas just this week, for example, Trump said just this week in Saudi Arabia that Hamas are the only ones responsible for the Gazan suffering. And Witkoff and Huckabee also said similar statements in front of the camera. So, someone is lying to us. And in that same note, NBC, New York Times, J-Post, Haaretz, and so on reports all the time of souring relationship between the U.S. and Israel, and that the new Israeli operation in Gaza that we'll talk about later a little bit is pointless. But I have to say that this seems to be their own wishful thinking and desires, since Witkoff himself thanked Netanyahu publicly for the pressure that Israel has put on Hamas, allowing them to get things done like the Idan Alexander deal that we'll talk about in a moment. And for you, a rule of thumb for today's media is that if there isn't an actual name, and better yet a video, then it's probably agenda-driven reporters, own bias, or paid notes trying to brainwash you. Anytime you hear sources, or senior sources, or officials, or some other vague thing, know that it's likely, not 100%, but likely flat out lies. By the way, on that note, not to be a hypocrite, when I say reports or something and don't give you full information of where it came from, it's because I'm doing it to save time and because the majority of you have no idea about the outlets that I use, who they are, and what they are. So if I say Al-Akhbar, which is a Lebanese newspaper, or if I say Al-Maydan, or if I say Abu Ali Express on Telegram, and so on and so forth, it means nothing to you. But if any of you want to know a source of one of my reports, I have them all. Ask below in the comments and I'll be glad to link the sources. As I mentioned, Idan Alexander, a soldier captured on October 7th, was released. He's a U.S. citizen as well as an Israeli citizen, and he was released. Mainstream media that we just talked about are calling this a Netanyahu failure because the United States, Hamas, and the Qatars made the deal without Israel's involvement, behind Netanyahu's back, and so on and so forth. But I would call bullshit on that, and as an example, I will give you the summary that General Amidror, the former head of the National Security Council, gave. He says, "This is 100% positive. We got a soldier released with no commitment from Israel. As we saw, the strikes on Gaza continued yesterday and the day before. And Israel, while did in fact commit to 3 days of negotiation in Doha in Qatar, that doesn't change their military actions or plans for a large-scale offensive after the Trump visit, which has already been named Gideon's Chariots." And we have to remember, this is part of what General Amidror said, that while President Donald Trump supports Israel, he is the president of the United States and not of Israel. And his commitment is to the U.S. citizens and not Israeli citizens. So, with that in mind, I have to agree this was a net positive and not a negative towards Netanyahu. Now, before we move on from Gaza, let's talk about a recent survey which gives us some very not surprising information that we all already knew, which is that the residents of Gaza and the rest of the Palestinian Authority territories are brainwashed, hostile, educated for hate, and not innocent bystanders, and that there is no partner for peace. For example, the demands for the resignation of Mahmoud Abbas, who is the so-called good Palestinian, the one who can be a partner for peace, are at an all-time high, something that I have no problem with because he is in fact a terrorist in a suit and incredibly corrupt. But anyways, the majority of the Palestinians blame Israel and the United States for their suffering and not Hamas. Most Gazans believe that the anti-Hamas demonstrations are driven by outsiders. 90% do not believe that Hamas committed the atrocities that we see so clearly on videos from October 7th. The majority of Palestinians think that Hamas will be the victor of the conflict. Almost 2/3 of them oppose the idea of having Arab countries govern or help govern, manage in Gaza. Satisfaction with Hamas's actions during the war is higher than the satisfaction with any other Palestinian Authority group like the PA or Fatah. And in regards to satisfaction scales, satisfaction of the Gazans with Arab regional players are topped by their satisfaction with the Houthis, followed by Hezbollah. So, in summary, there are still no partners for peace. They are still fully on board with the atrocities of Hamas, which they don't even believe were atrocities, and so on. A new humanitarian charity was founded by the United States called the Humanitarian Gaza Fund, and it said that it will start work before the end of May in Gaza, that Israel has agreed to increase the distribution spots and to ensure safe entrance of food to Gaza. Now, moving on to something that's very important, very new, just came out, the new ceasefire plan that seems to be moving forward. And it is quite similar to the previous one that I presented here. Let's see some of the changes and updates. So, let's go through it. Step 1, release of half the hostages within days. Step 2, release of the rest during the negotiation phase. Step 3, release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners in an irrational number based on the existing keys that used to be about 50 per hostage. Step 4, the resumption of humanitarian aid. Step 5, an end to the Israeli attacks within the Gaza Strip and a withdrawal to the borders of the Strip. Now we're going to move on to the new changes and updates that did not exist in previous negotiations. Step 6, disarming the Hamas and handing over its weapons to Arab players in the region. Step 7, removal of Hamas and Islamic Jihad high-ranking members from the Gaza Strip. Step 8, rebuilding the Gaza Strip under Arab and U.S. management with Palestinian Authority supervision. Step 9, incorporating the Palestinian Authority into the management of the Gaza Strip after major reforms within the Palestinian Authority, an obvious step that can delay indefinitely such incorporation of them into management. Step 10, incorporating the Hamas police into the policing force of Gaza, something that of course will produce challenges, because if Hamas stays with a police force, they will remain the ruling power in Gaza. Now, let's move on briefly to Lebanon, just to share with you that things are still going on there. A couple days ago, Israel did a strike on a motorcycle, killing a Hezbollah operative. Yesterday, Israel struck in the Bekaa Valley once again, hitting Hezbollah infrastructures. This is just to say that things are not hunky-dory in Lebanon. Moving on to Syria, a lot has been going on there. Mossad assets in Syria located and retrieved the remains of Tzvika Feldman, one of the 3 soldiers missing since the Sultan Yaakov battle in the Peace for Galilee War of 1982, also known as the First Lebanon War. The unit worked within Syria for years, building up their cover story and locating information. After the fall of the Assad regime, there was a breakthrough in the case which allowed them to retrieve the remains. Briefly, I'll just share with you a little about that battle. The Sultan Yaakov battle was one of the last engagements of the 1982 Lebanon War, when the Israeli forces were trying to gain more ground before the ceasefire was implemented, and they fought in Sultan Yaakov. They fought Syrian forces that were also invested in the war, even though it was in Lebanon. That's life. And Israel was not able to advance, did not do well. They had over 30 casualties in that battle. 3 of the soldiers' remains were taken and were missing for decades. In 2019, the remains of Zacharia Baumel were returned to Israel by Russian President Vladimir Putin when Netanyahu visited him in Russia. Israel is hoping that their information about the 3rd and last of the 3, Yehuda Katz, will come to light shortly. Coincidentally, 14 years after the disappearance of the American journalist Austin Tace, his remains were found in a North Syrian cemetery. Now, slightly moving away from all of this, but still staying in Syria, Donald Trump says that the Syrian president will recognize and make peace with Israel when things stabilize within Syria. Donald Trump also says that the removal of Syrian sanctions is in coordination with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and is that Israel was informed, and this was done to give the new regime a chance to survive. This apparently was arranged in a meeting between Donald Trump, President Ashara of Syria, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia, and a Zoom-in call from Turkish President Erdogan. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later, possibly. But let's see, Donald Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia was very productive. First of all, it's worth noting that Elon Musk joined him, but in any case, it was very productive on the economic sphere. There were signed understandings of cooperation in energy, mining, medicine, arms, and so on. And also, Donald Trump canceled a ban on exporting NVIDIA chips to Saudi Arabia. In addition, Donald Trump also signed a deal for $1.2 trillion with Qatar, including 160 planes from Boeing for over $200 billion. Lots of economic advancement going on in these deals. Turkey, there's big news from Turkey. The Kurdish PKK militia released a statement that they are laying down their arms, that the time for armed struggle is over, and that they, as an organization, have completed their role in history. Jumping out to Yemen for a second, Yemen launched multiple missiles in the last couple of days to Israel at a much higher rate than they had in the past. I had to enter my bomb shelter multiple times this week. Now, I wanted to talk with you guys about the Israeli strikes on Yemen, what they hit, how it affects things, but this video is pretty long, so we are not going to talk about that today. We'll bump it to Sunday, barring any urgent news stories, and we'll move on to the ICC. The International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, a report in the Wall Street Journal says that Karim Khan's only reason for his attack against Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant was to move away from his own scandals, because he's being accused of rape against his own workers, and that this charges against Israel are political and not factual. But this doesn't surprise anyone, because this ICC, this International Criminal Court, this institute is political by nature. And another thing that just came up about it is that their work has ground to a halt due to the sanctions laid on them by President Trump. For whatever reason, the chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, has no access to his emails or his bank accounts, and that the U.S. workers of the ICC are being warned of actions against them should they return to the U.S., and that many different organizations have stopped working with them. Now, if this organization, the ICC, was not political, was not biased, was not anti-Semitic, then this report would be very concerning. Judges and courts are being threatened. But since they are political and anti-Semitic and biased and not fair arbiters, then you know what? I don't really mind. Last report for the day is an interesting report out of the United Kingdom. There's a case in front of the United Kingdom's high courts regarding the export of F-35 parts and accessories, which Palestinian organizations are saying are sent to Israel and against UK laws. The lawyers for the United Kingdom government have stated that there is no genocide in Gaza and that the IDF is not targeting women and children. That's very good news from one of our allies, that they are standing with us and supporting us in this matter, although obviously it could be because of the financial gain. Now, I have to make one correction. Last video, I accidentally said Donald Huckabee instead of Mike Huckabee when I was talking about the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And as you know, I do my best to give you correct information. And if I've made mistakes, please point them out to me. It's important that we engage, that you comment, do so respectfully. If you like this, if you enjoyed this, feel free to like and subscribe, thumbs up, and more importantly, if you feel there's someone who could benefit from this, share the video. And for all of you out there, thank you for standing with us, and shalom.